Hi, bestie. It's me, Jaya. Welcome back to Skein and Tell, the podcast that unravels it all. In today's episode, I will take you on an enchanting journey through time, legends, and myths as we explore the fascinating intersection of crochet, knitting, and folklore. Now, yarn may seem like an everyday material, and I know it is for us, but throughout history, it has been woven into some of the most mystical and magical tales. Whether it's the creation of the world, or weaving of fate, or crafting of enchanted garments, crochet, knitting have played a significant role in many legendary stories. So grab your favorite yarn and let's dive into the mythical threads that tie together the art of crochet, knitting, and folklore. Let's start with one of the oldest, most powerful symbols of yarn in mythology, which is the Norns from the Norse mythology. Now, these are three women that are often depicted sitting by the roots of the world tree, weaving the threads of fate for every living being. In Norse mythology, the Norns are not just spinsters. They're like the ultimate weavers of destiny. They spin and they weave the threads of life for gods and humans alike, each one representing a part of the continuum of time. Because, mind you, their names are, I think, and I'm going to pronounce them wrong, but one of them is called Ut, which is the past. The present is called Verdendi. And then we have Skuld for the future. So these are their names, right? And they represent, obviously, the past, the present, and the future. Now, their work is often portrayed as an eternal cosmic weaving where every decision made in the present affects the threads of the future. And interestingly, this mythic connection between weaving and fate has persisted throughout human history because the Norns have parallels in many cultures' understanding of fate, whether it's in the Greek Moirai or the Roman Parcae, who all utilize weaving or spinning to control the destiny of mortals. Now, the Norns' eternal task of weaving the threads of life is actually a very powerful image on how crocheting and knitting have been associated with both creation and destruction. So, yeah. Another famous tale that brings yarn and mythical craftsmanship together is the story of the Golden Fleece from the Greek mythology. Now, in this legend, Jason and the Argonauts embark on a perilous journey to retrieve the Golden Fleece, which is a symbol of kingship and a symbol of authority. The fleece itself was said to be the fleece of a magical ram that had been sent by the gods. And while not exactly knitted or crochet, the idea of a magical fleece connects yarn to this legendary power. Now, the fleece was sacred and powerful, and it was believed to give to whoever controlled it a supreme superpower, basically. So the fleece was guarded by a dragon, and was only attainable through incredible feats of, strength and strong, muscly fights. and this myth has actually sparked many artistic interpretation, often weaving themes of power, transformation, and the desire for control. It's actually, in a metaphorical sense, representing an object that holds the world together, just like knit or crochet would hold together the threads of meaning and of culture and of power. So very, very beautiful and I really like this story, actually. And keeping with the Greeks, I have another story for you. But first, we interrupt this episode for a special segment that explores the history of yarn, the Archeology of Yarn, brought to you, why do I keep doing this? By our special correspondent, Yardiana Jones. Today we're talking about a fiber so luxurious, so ethereal, so ridiculously soft that it has graced the backs of royalty and rock stars alike. I'm talking about, can you guess? No, you can't. Mohair. That is right. Mohair isn't just a fancy word for your yarn-obsessed aunt, and me. It's a fiber with history richer than a billionaire's sock drawer. So grab your fluffiest sweater and let's unravel the story of mohair one luxurious strand at a time. All right, let's start with the basics. Where does mohair come from? Is it from a mohair tree? Nope. Is it from an Angora rabbit? Also nope. So don't get confused. That's Angora fiber. Mohair comes from the fabulous silky hair Angora goat. Not the bunny, the goat. Now, these goats are basically the supermodels of the livestock world. They're long, they're curly locks, they're naturally photogenic, and they're very high maintenance. But there's a huge plot twist, because it's getting interesting a little bit. Angora goats are originally from, drumroll please, Turkey. More specifically, the region of Ankara, which, fun fact, also gave us the Angora rabbit and the Angora cat, apparently. So Turkey was just chumming out fluffy animals like a fiber factory. Fluffy, 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 fluffy everywhere. Way back in the 13th century, the people of Turkey were keeping their Angora goats under lock and key. That's right, mohair was considered so special that they wouldn't let their goats leave the country. No. If you wanted mohair, you had to go through Turkey, and they weren't about to just let anyone get their hands on it. No. Oh, you want some mohair? Well, that's too bad. You have to come to Turkey to get it. And you're going to get only the fabric, not the goat. But for centuries, this strategy, it worked. It really worked. Mohair became the ultra-exclusive fabric worn by Ottoman sultans, Persian royalty, and basically anyone who wanted to scream, "I'm fancy!" with their clothes. But you know what happens when something is exclusive? Well, people get desperate to get their hands on it. So enter the 16th century. A few sneaky traders managed to smuggle some Angora goats out of Turkey, and boom, suddenly the fiber world was never the same. The goats spread to Spain, to France, and eventually to South Africa and Texas. Where they became a huge industry. By the 19th century, mohair was officially an international sensation. Queen Victoria, obsessed with it. Fancy European fashion houses, they loved it. Texas ranchers also, they made empires out of it. And that's right. I mean, Texas, of all places, became one of the biggest mohair producers in the world. And nothing says luxury fiber than a goat living its best life in the Lone Star State. All right, so what makes mohair so different from regular wool? Well, for starters, it's insanely soft. Unlike regular sheep's wool, mohair fibers are smoother, which means that they don't have that itchy, scratchy feeling that makes you regret putting on a sweater. And second of all, it's got this insane luster, like I'm talking angelic glow levels of shine. Mohair takes dye like a dream, which is why you'll often see it in crazy, vibrant colors too. And third, it's super strong. I mean, seriously, mohair is one of the most durable natural fibers out there. It resists wrinkles, it holds its shape, and it can basically survive the apocalypse while still looking fabulous. So to sum it up, mohair is soft, shiny, and strong. Basically, it's like the Beyonce of the fiber world. Now, remember how I said mohair was a fiber for royalty? Well, fast forward a few centuries, and it wasn't just kings and queens rocking mohair. No. By the 20th centuries, rock stars were all over it too. So ever seen one of those fuzzy, slightly ridiculously looking sweaters from the 60s? Well, you can think, that's mohair. It's mohair for you. The Beatles, they wore mohair suits. Punk bands in the 70s, they rocked mohair sweaters like it was nobody's business. Kurt Cobain, iconic mohair cardigan moment. And that's right, this once royal fabric somehow made it, made the jump from the sultans to rock legends. So how's that for range, Nowadays, mohair is still considered a luxury fiber. Sure, it's not as exclusive as it was in the Ottoman Turkey, but it's still a big deal in the knitting and fashion world. So if you've ever felt, a fluffy halo-like yarn that made you question reality, it was probably mohair. But here's the thing. Mohair can be a little bit, high maintenance. It's prone to shedding. It needs special washing. And if you ever try to frog a mohair project, well, let's say you've probably had an emotional breakdown or two, because I sure did. But hey, beauty comes at a price, and mohair is, I think, definitely worth it. So let's recap. Mohair has been around for centuries. It was once the fiber of royalty. It survived goat smuggling scandals. It became the rock star fashion staple and is still one of the most sought-after luxury fibers today. And that's not bad for some fluffy goats from Turkey, huh? Well, next time you see a mohair sweater in a thrift shop or a skein of mohair, just remember, you're holding centuries of history of fashion and rebellious rock star energy in your hands. So if anyone asks you, why are you buying more kid silk? And I'm looking at you, Sebastian. Just tell them, shut up. Now, in Greek mythology, the Moirai, known as the Fates, I have a little Australian coming out of me in there. But so, okay, I'll take it from the top. So in Greek mythology, the Moirai, known as the Fates, are three sisters who determine the lifespan and destiny of all the living beings. That sounds very familiar to the Norse story I told you. So their tools, spindles, threads, and the famous spinning wheel. Clotho was one of the Fates. She spins the thread of life. Then we have Lachesis. She measures it. Then we have Atropos, who cuts it. And that's pretty much when a person's life ends. Yeah. But the spinning wheel is an object often associated with domestic life and textile production, right? But it becomes also a powerful symbol of the uncontrollable forces of faith, because just like knitting and crocheting, the Fates are deeply connected to the concept of time, and the work just can't be undone. In some versions of the story, the act of spinning or weaving the thread of life could be seen as a metaphor for how we create our own fate, stitch by stitch, moment by moment, if you will. And the symbolism of yarn in spinning Greek mythology emphasizes how deeply connected thread and destiny are actually in folklore. So weaving is often seen as the act of creation, and in the case of the Moirai, it's a creation that binds the very essence of life to a predetermined fate. Throughout European folklore, knitting has also been tied to magic, often used by witches or even fairies and other mythical beings to perform magical feats. Now, in many stories, the simple act of knitting or crocheting can transform a person's fate or even bring about the creation of magical objects, right? So in some European fairy tales, witches and other magical beings are actually depicted enchanting objects or items to have specific magical properties. For instance, in one story that I came across when I was writing this episode, a witch was known to knit a blanket that grants the person who sleeps under it the ability to travel through time. Now, that's a cool superpower. I would love to do that, Just imagine just going back in time or going in the future. Oh, that's kind of cool. But if you slept under that specific blanket, you could also get different kind of superpowers. Like, for instance, in some of the tales that I also found, witches used their knitting skills to create cloaks, or some sort of garments that would grant invisibility. And we all know the famous cloak from Harry Potter that granted invisibility. They had to have their stories told from somewhere. Another very famous example that I came across was the story of the wild swans, in which a princess knits magical shirts from nettles to free her brothers who have been turned into swans. Now, the act of knitting and weaving becomes a key part in the plot, as the princess's patience and skills are directly tied to breaking this curse, right? We covered princesses, we covered witches, but what about fairies? Now, fairy lore also associates knitting with magical abilities. In some stories, fairies knit not only for practical purposes, like making, little dresses and little cute socks for fairies, but also to weave the magic into objects they create, just like we've seen with the witches. So these fairy knit garments often have special properties such as granting wishes or protections from evil. And overall, the act of crocheting or knitting in these stories is not just a physical task, it's a channel for supernatural forces, furthering the idea that the craft of knitting and crocheting can be imbued with magical intent. It's time for Weird Yarn Monday, where we explore the fibers that make other fibers nervously laugh. The world of unusual and interesting yarn is surprisingly vast. And today, we're diving into the bad boy of the botanical fiber world. That is nettle yarn. That's right, the same plant that's been ambushing hikers and making gardeners swear creatively for centuries is now coming to a project near you. Now, I know what you're thinking. Are we about to be knitting or crocheting with salt plants? And the answer is yes. But don't worry. Nettle yarn won't turn your cozy sweater into a medieval torture device. No. The stinging cells of nettles are found only on the leaves, not the stalks. And the stalks are the ones that are processed to make this yarn. And during the process, those stinging cells are completely processed out. During the process, they're processed out. Wow, that's good math. Although I imagine the possibilities for sweaters that you could actually knit, maybe for your ex or something. Pew, pew. Actually, touching this yarn last week when I found a very, very small, tiny yarn shop in my town, it surprised me because it was made for socks. So the composition of the skein itself was 70% superwash wool and 30% nettle fibers. And the irony is that this fiber that once caused welts all over my ankles when I was a little kid and I ran after my ball that rolled into a huge nettle pile could now actually create the right, the perfect project, the perfect pair of socks to keep my ankles warm. That's, the irony of life. I think that the best part would probably be telling your non-crafter friends about your new nettle project. And the looks of horrors alone are pretty worth the price. Oh, this? this is, I'm just knitting with paint plants. It's fine. Want to touch it? Come on, touch it. I can just imagine it. So this might actually keep probably my son away from touching my project. Yeah. I just have to wait for him to get stung by nettles so I can explain what a nettle is first. And then, every time he wants to touch my projects, I can just tell him, no. This is made out of nettle yarn. You're going to get stung. And there you have it. I have peace and quiet. So yeah, nettle yarn, the fiber with a backstory that's gone from causing pain to preventing it. One sustainable, cozy garment at a time. And next week, who knows? Poison ivy macrame? I'm just kidding. Or am I? Now, knitting and crocheting aren't just limited to gods and humans in folklore. Like we've seen, many cultures, mythical creatures themselves are believed to have some connection to yarn in a way or another. And it's not just all witches and fairies and cutesy little creatures, right? It's also creature destined to end the world, for instance. So there's like this very interesting myth also in Norse folklore where it involves the creation of the monstrous wolf Fenrir, a creature destined to bring about Ragnarok. And Ragnarok is basically the end of the world in Norse folklore. And some versions of the myth suggest that Fenrir's power could be controlled or bound by enchanted yarn, a thread called Gleipnir, which was made by the dwarfs from 6 impossible materials. The thread was a mixture of mythical elements, and it was said to be as thin as silk thread, but unbreakable, symbolizing, the complex and delicate balance between the forces of faith and power. And if we're still in this kind of a spooky folklore tales, in various cultures, cursed threads or enchanted weavings have been used to bind or trap creatures like dragons or trapping trolls. And these stories often speak of a hero or a heroine who must unravel the threads of a curse or magically craft a garment to free themselves, or this notion of weaving as both a creative and binding act speaks once again to the duality of yarn and thread in folklore, where creation and destruction often just go hand in hand, right? And also in many cultures, creation myths using weaving or spinning as a metaphor for the creation of the universe itself is often also reoccurring, because we see a lot of examples of that. And the most, I think, or the ones that I have fallen across is a really, really famous example called the Hobbii people of Native American tradition, who speak of the Spider Woman, which is a divine figure who wove the fabric of the worlds with threads of light. So the universe in this sense is often seen as vast, interconnected fabric knitted together by cosmic forces. So the Spider Woman, along, other cosmic weavers like the Greek goddesses Athena, who also spun the thread of human destiny, exemplifies the idea that all existence is somehow woven or stitched together. So in this way, the mythical figures of the weaver or knitter transcends simple crafting and just becomes a symbol of interconnectedness of all the things. How every stitch, how every thread holds together the world itself. And I think that that is very magical and beautiful. And we should keep that in mind. All right, well, it is incredible to think how crochet and knitting have been so deeply intertwined with the world of myth and magic. I mean, from the weaving of fate to the enchanted garment that holds power, yarn has been used in folklore to represent creation and control, and to be the delicate balance between life and death and absolutely everything in between. Now, the myths that we've talked about today remind us that the simple act of crocheting or the simple act of knitting is not just about making items to keep you warm. It's about engaging in a practice that in a lot of cultures, and I'm talking almost every single culture, has been seen as deeply connected to the universe, to the time itself as a concept, and even to the divine, right? So next time, when you pick up a crochet hook or knitting needles, remember that you're not just making something with yarn. You might be continuing an ancient tradition of weaving magic and myth into the world. So yeah, thank you once again for joining me today on this mythological journey, I would say, through Skein and Tell. So if you enjoyed this episode, bestie, make sure to subscribe and leave a review. And remember, every stitch you make is part of a story far bigger than ourselves. It's part of a magical, mythical thread that has been woven for generations. Okay, I'll see you next time. Love you, bestie. Bye.